We're back. We just made it through IPsec VPNs and all of the excitement that goes with those. How about we build on that a little bit and think about adding a new layer of, connectivity in many ways with the layer 2 VPN. So we're going to talk about what we're going to do with the layer 2 VPN, how it's all going to come together, what we're doing, why do we have it? And a layer 2 VPN is kind of like a long distance bridge. We're going to think about the L2 VPN in the same types of scenarios where we thought about logical bridging a while ago, right? If you remember back in the series, we talked about logical bridging. But that logical bridging was in the edge transport node, and it was kind of a localized thing. Well, here we're looking at the same sort of idea of taking that external network and stitching it together with maybe an NSX network. Except we're doing that across data center boundaries or across WAN boundaries or something like that. And so that's what we're looking at with layer 2 VPNs. Now, the architecture is a client-server based architecture. My server, my layer 2 VPN server, that's going to be my local VPN service. That's going to be inside of NSX. And then the client will be out in my remote site somewhere. Now, we'll talk about how that client is going to be provided, but this is a client-server thing. Now, as we dig into this, we'll actually see that IPsec is being used, right? We're using our IPsec VPN and layering the layer 2 VPN on top of that. And the L2 VPN is going to use GRE and some other tools to be able to support that layer 2 stitching, that layer 2 attachment of different networks. And we can look at our packet processing and kind of see some of that, where we can see, as traffic comes into the edge and goes to the bridge port that's going to be instantiated for this to happen, we're going to do some GRE encapsulation, we're going to do some IPsec encryption and so on. And so we can kind of see the flow, the layer 2 VPN flow in and out of an NSX gateway, ultimately. So what do we need to think about? What do we need to consider here? Layer 2 VPNs can be configured on either Tier 0 or Tier 1 gateways. We saw that with IPsec VPN, so the same kind of holds true here. The segments in NSX have to be connected to a gateway, probably my Tier 0 or Tier 1, wherever I've created the VPN. NSX is going to have one layer 2 VPN service per gateway, meaning that I can have a layer 2 VPN server on one gateway, and that's it, right? Just that one server. Or I can have a layer 2 VPN client configured on a gateway, and that's it. I can have multiple layer 2 VPN clients and servers. They just have to be spread across equally as many gateways. And so we have to think about that. And 4,000-ish segments, 4,094 layer 2 segments, that's what we can extend with our layer 2 VPN. That's a pretty significant scale, I think, given the types of use cases we might be looking at here. But naturally, you may find use cases where 4,094 doesn't seem like so much anymore. Now, layer 2 VPN clients. I mentioned that an NSX gateway has to be the layer 2 VPN server, right? And then we've got a couple of different kinds of clients that we can look at. One would be another NSX managed gateway. So a Tier 0 or a Tier 1 gateway out in another location. We can also support, though, non-NSX managed environments through what we call the autonomous edge. The autonomous edge is simply an edge transport node that has been decoupled from the NSX management plane so that we can configure it in kind of a standalone fashion, right? We can configure it just as that layer 2 VPN client. So we've got those two choices for our layer 2 VPN, either an NSX managed location for our client or an autonomous edge for our client. Now, that's okay, right? The autonomous edge gives us flexibility for both vSphere and non-vSphere locations. For example, AWS or Azure. We can deploy an autonomous edge and VPN out to, or provide a layer 2 VPN out to those public cloud tenancies. So we've got some flexibility here that we may not see on the surface, thinking, oh well, this has to be an NSX client. It's not quite as restrictive as it may sound. So here we kind of see a topology. We see that both segments on the ends, the networks we want to stitch together, have a common tunnel ID setting, right? So that's one of the things we're going to define when we're building our tunnel together is the tunnel ID. And that's how the that's how the clients and the servers are going to map together a specific pair of networks. So here we've got, on the left side, we've got an overlay segment. On the right side, we have a VLAN network. We're using the layer 2 VPN to tie those two networks together using tunnel ID 100, right? So when the client or server receives traffic to or from tunnel ID 100, we're going to send that to the appropriate backend segment. Now, how do we create this? Well, we start by doing some of the work that we just did with the IPsec VPN. So, I need an IPsec VPN service, and I need a local VPN endpoint for my gateway. Those are things that we just talked about with IPsec VPNs. Once I have those, then I need to start configuring my L2 VPN. So I'm going to add a layer 2 VPN server service. I'm going to create an L2 VPN server session. And then I'm going to attach my segments to the layer 2 VPN and define the things that are going to go there. So IPsec VPN service, well, this is pretty much like we just talked about in the previous video, where I go into my VPN services and add an IPsec service, just like any other IPsec VPN service, right? There's nothing unique here to the layer 2 VPN. I just need this service available. We're going to use it because we're using IPsec under the hood, if you will. And the endpoint, again, nothing particularly special here, but I do need to create this and associate it back to that IPsec session. Now, if I'm using the layer 2 VPN and the IPsec VPN, I probably do, just for administrative organization, I probably do want to create a dedicated IPsec service and a dedicated endpoint just for the layer 2 VPN, right? There's, like I said, there's nothing about the configuration here that makes these special, but I'm probably going to keep them separated just so that I know these things are for my L2 VPN and those things are for my IPsec VPNs, and let's keep them separated. Then I can go back to my services and add an L2 VPN server service, where I'm going to tie this service back to whatever gateway my L2 VPN needs to be on. And then I'm going to build my server session. So, this is just a matter of creating the L2 VPN server session and tying it back to the service itself. Once that's all done, what do? I have to add my segments to the VPN, right? So I can go and edit my segment and associate it with the layer 2 VPN and assign the tunnel ID and the VLAN to which I want to bridge. So I can do that from the segment UI here, or from my layer 2 VPN configuration. I can drill into my segments like we're showing here, and I can set my segments on the L2 VPN service. So that's kind of handy. I don't have to go back and forth between my L2 VPN UI and my segments UI. I can do all my configuration from right here if that's going to make things a little more convenient. Now, the layer 2 VPN client, that's not a whole lot different. I'm still going to need the IPsec configuration, and then I'm going to need the layer 2 VPN client configuration. If I'm doing this all in an NSX managed endpoint, in other words, if I'm creating a layer 2 VPN from a tier 1 gateway in one location to a tier 1 gateway in another location, the workflow is almost the same. It's almost the same. The difference is when I'm creating my VPN sessions, I'm going to create a client session instead of a server session. So we can build out our layer 2 VPN client service here and tie that to our gateway. And now, when I'm configuring the client session, I'm going to need a piece of information from my layer 2 VPN server. And that's what we're showing here, right? We're looking at the L2 VPN server service. We're coming in and we highlight this download config link. The download config gives us some basic information about the VPN configuration, but importantly here, it gives us what we call the peer code. So the peer code is simply a hashed configuration, really. Meaning that I can take this information. It looks like a bunch of, should we could just call it gibberish here? It looks like this encoded data, but we can plug this into our layer 2 VPN client, and the layer 2 VPN client knows exactly what we're looking for. In other words, this is going to save us a ton of time and energy in thinking about our configuration, but we have to come back to our layer 2 VPN server to pull down this text file and copy this peer code. Now, it's very important to note here that in this text file, all of the values are encapsulated in double quotes. So when we pull this peer code, look very closely at how we've got that highlighted. The open quote and the close quote are not selected. That's very much done on purpose, right? We don't need the quotes. We just need the values in between the quotes. And so here's our layer 2 VPN service on the client side. Notice we're setting up, we're saying, hey, this is our local endpoint. This is the remote VPN endpoint that we're trying to talk to. And here's my configuration, my peer configuration. This is where I paste the peer code. Right? This way, we don't have to worry about questioning, did I change something in the config? Do I not have something right in the client configuration? We simply copy and paste from the server. Everything is precisely configured exactly as it needs to be. On my client side, I'm going to do exactly the same thing to configure my segments as I did on the server side, where I can either go into the segments UI or I can go in the VPN service and go to set my segments and define them all here in the L2 VPN UI. All right, that's your choice. And so that's all there is to it. When it comes down to it, it's really setting up a layer 2 VPN client and a layer 2 VPN server are nearly identical workflows. There's a little bit in the detail that's different, but they're pretty similar. Now, here in this lab, we're going to do something a little bit different still, in that we're going to configure a layer 2 VPN with an autonomous edge as a client. So you'll get to see that as well. And the autonomous edge, like we said, is great for those non-NSX managed locations where I need to span networks. So we're going to do this lab. Now, this lab does take us a little while. Right? We just need to be patient through this because we're deploying a new edge. We're going to create a single node edge cluster. So we want a dedicated edge cluster for our L2 VPN and our IPsec VPNs for that matter. And that's just in our lab here. So we're going to build out a new edge cluster with a single edge node in it. Then we're going to deploy a tier 0 gateway. We're going to configure up our IPsec and layer 2 VPNs. We're also going to see the autonomous edge on the other side, and we're going to verify that everything does work. So that's our plan for this lab. We're going to play with VPNs for a little bit. If you come back when you're done with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this video and this entire series up. See you soon. Well, how exciting was that? VPNs, oh my, right? We got to play with IPsec and layer 2 and set everything up. We got to look at the autonomous edge. There's a lot of good stuff in that lab. Now, here, this video specifically, we talked about layer 2 VPNs. We talked about how we're going to build them. We worked through the process of building them. In this longer series of videos, what have we talked about? We talked about so many services that we can work with in NSX, whether it's source and destination NAT or NAT64, or talked about DHCP and DNS services. We talked about how we can run these things typically in an active standby gateway configuration, but we can also now configure an active stateful configuration, which is kind of nifty, especially if I need that added scale on my gateways, that active scale. We talked about the NSX Advanced Load Balancer and what that's going to mean for load balancing in NSX from here to the future. Then we talked about VPNs quite a bit over these last couple of videos. So that's really, as we look at this and flip over to our final key point slide, that's really everything that we've covered, right? A lot of really good stuff. Services are a big place. We've kind of changed a few things here in NSX4. So that's awesome. If you come back, our next topic, everybody's favorite, user access, role-based access control, right? User accounts, things like that. That's what we have coming up next. We'll see you soon.